Well, Noah, for this second season of The Americans, you had a lot of heavy lifting. You basically carry your own half of the show because Matthew and Carrie have their part of the show, and then you got the FBI side of the show, and the two don't meet up very often. Tell us about this arc of this season with you. You got this love affair going on. You may betray your country.
Yeah.
Just all kinds of things going on for you this year.
Yeah, it was a very long and hard road for Stan, with the character that I play this year. He, unbeknownst to him, at the end of the first season, he's been double-crossed by Nina, played by Annette Mahendra, the Soviet mole he has in the Residentura, and she's been telling him all this season that she's in trouble and that she's going to get expedited, that she's going to get taken back to the Soviet Union because this new character, Oleg, has come into the Residentura and is on to us. So Stan spends a lot of the season trying to come up with a plan to get Nina out, to in fact extricate her from and hide her somewhere in America but he's being asked along the way to provide secret information to the Residentura to prove, so that Nina can prove to them that she's in fact not betraying her country. So Stan is sort of faced with this dilemma of how much is he willing to compromise the security of the country to protect Nina. And that's sort of the looming question over the arc of the whole season. He does a few little teeny sort of very harmless things along the way, but he's asked finally to do a big betrayal to reveal very important secrets about stealth technology to the Soviets in exchange for Nina's life. And the question that sort of hangs is, what's he going to do? And can he come up with an alternate plan? In the meantime, his marriage is crumbling. His wife is having an affair with another man, and she's, in fact, by the end of the season, she moves out. So Stan is, sort of his partner who has never been replaced, the one he lost last season. So he's sort of ever increasingly isolated, challenged, tormented, trying to figure out. He seems to be backed into a corner during most of the season with very little relief. So it was sort of it's an arduous time for the character.
Now, do they give you a heads up as to what's coming like down the road, or do you have to wait for each script to go, well, I hope Stan gets out of this mess?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't have a big heads up, actually. I don't really know where it's going. Ultimately, I didn't know the arc of the season, and it's sort of piecemeal that I find out the information, and it keeps it actually interesting for me in a way. I'm of two minds of it in a way, because I'm sort of following. I have the same experience that the audience has watching the show. As I read the scripts and they come in, I really don't know what Stan's going to do, and I'm sort of on pins and needles, trying to hoping for the best for him. But sometimes we'll have a conversation, Joe Weisberg and Joel Fields, the executive producers, about sort of a couple of episodes ahead, an arc of sort of where we're headed or what might happen or may not happen. But I really am sort of left in the dark for the most part, and it's revealed. It's a slow roll of reveal.
Well, you mentioned the crumbling marriage. You kept your affair secret pretty much for the most part from your wife, but she's just right out there in the open.
Yeah. I mean, much to her credit, it's sort of healthy in a way. There was a couple of exchanges last season where she sort of intimated understanding that I knew that she knew I was having an affair, and Stan's denial was so weak and half-hearted that it seems it's almost understood, although it's not explicit. And then in this season, Sandra comes to Stan and just says, "Look, I'm going away with a man I met for the weekend to see if something's there." And I thought that was such beautiful writing on their part, actually, that Stan doesn't even really argue with her. He doesn't even really try to dissuade her from going. He has very little ground to stand on, because in that very conversation she says to him, "Well, tell me you're not having an affair." And he can't even muster a no or a yes. He's just sort of muted by the confrontation. And so she's certainly handling her journey in a more honest, open, shared way. As painful as it is a very interesting sort of dynamic that's emerged between the two of them.
And back to Nina, do you feel like he's in love with her, or is he really trying to protect this asset that he is at least fond of?
I think by this point it's becoming clearer and clearer, certainly as the season unfolds, that he has real feelings for her. I think for whatever reason, and this may be a longer conversation, but somehow she's become the one thing that he's holding on to. Uh, uh, I think partially as a way to try to save her, and it maybe it's a way of him trying to save himself to some degree. If he can just sort of get her safe and out of this morass of danger and duplicity and unknown, he can maybe somehow resolve some piece of himself that is broken. So I think his feelings for her run far deeper and wider than just an asset that's valuable to him and his job. I think she's become quite powerful and meaningful to him in his life in a way that he didn't anticipate, and that has definitely thrown him off of his normal game.
You play a lot of characters over your career, and this one obviously a series character, so you play it for a lot longer. Do you, I guess I'm asking, do you pull for him? Do you, like in the finale of the season, when he goes to that bench and ultimately leaves that note that says, Nina, tell Nina I'm sorry. I mean, are you pulling for him to make those kind of good decisions, or as an actor, would you like for maybe it to go the wrong way, so because that's more fun to play?
I find myself always pulling for him. I really want him to do the right thing. I mean, I think in the same way that sort of to some degree we're all pulling for ourselves in our lives. We hope to be the best selves we can be. I think as an actor, when you get that close to a character and spend that much time in their skin, which is this is so far exceeds anything work I've ever done before in terms of the length of time living with Stan. So it conflates in some weird alchemic way that I find it's hard. I mean, in some from some angle, the job is in fact to merge the two, the self and the character, so that you feel it's sort of seamless. I do find myself taking Stan's life very personally. I mean, that's kind of the job, but I find that I am very vulnerable to that. And sometimes when I'm having conversations with the writers and we talk about Stan, they characterize him in a way that differs from my understanding of him. I take offense sometimes if you impeach his integrity or his commitment or his nobility. I mean, I think we all like to think of ourselves as the heroes of our own lives, that we're trying to do the best we can do, and I think Stan certainly is within that framework. He's committed his life to serving his country at great cost to himself. I think he's a true patriot. I think he's, as these men and women who really do serve in these roles function, it's a tremendous personal sacrifice with very little reward, external public reward. It's your own sense of self and how you're contributing to the world in which you live. And I think Stan has a really profound sense of obligation and gratitude. And he's spiraled into this dark, crazy. I mean, he didn't start out in counterintelligence work. When we meet him in the beginning of the show, he's just transferred to Washington, D.C. from doing undercover work, domestic work. So counterintelligence is a world that I don't think he planned on going into. He got pulled into it. He showed an aptitude for it. But I think so he maybe wasn't quite fit to handle it emotionally, psychologically, in the way that he would have been for. We don't know much about his 3 years undercover with the white supremacists that's alluded to in season 1, but I think the world of international espionage is more challenging, complex, and destructive to his constitution than he would have anticipated. I think he imagined he was moving to Washington, D.C. He was going to be living with his family. He wasn't going to be working undercover. It'd be a chance to sort of nourish and grow and hopefully solidify that family unit. And in fact, it's just been devastating for the family and for him, and most of all. So that's a long-winded answer, but yeah, I somehow do take it very personally and root for him in the best way. And it's all fun to play. I mean, the great thing is, even if he does things that are not heroic or compromised or even worse, of course it's great fun to play that. That's if no one wants to just play Mr. Clean, because there's not that much texture or grit or there to explore. So the frailties and the vulnerabilities and the mistakes that we make are great fun to explore and play within the safety of of fiction.
That's interesting about you talking about. I've heard a lot of TV actors over the years, for decades. They'll say like, writers may come and go, directors may come and go, but ultimately I'm the protector of this character.
Right. Well, I think it's required that you feel possessive of the character. I mean, the actor must feel ownership, or he or she wouldn't be able to play the role. I mean, in the end, it's almost helpful to be somewhat delusional about. I mean, I find it helpful imaginatively to not acknowledge that there are strings to these characters, that they're being pulled and pushed by writers in a room somewhere. Maybe that's a metaphor for our life, depending if you believe in destiny or fate. But certainly, we have to believe that we're responsible for our actions and that we control our lives. And I think as an actor, you need to feel that about your character to some degree. And maybe it sounds a little odd, but you have to divorce the reality of that this has been crafted and structured in a writer's room and make it your own internal truth, so that organic feeling is available. Otherwise, you feel like you don't ever want to feel like you're acting. Hopefully.
Talk about Annette, if you would. We're going to interview her in just a little while. You have a lot of scenes with her. What should we know about her? What should we ask her when we see her in a little while?
Gosh, many questions. Most of all, from my character's point of view, you have to get her to confess that Nina, of course, really loves Stan. That's unequivocally the case. She's a wonderful actress. She hadn't done much work before this series. She's kind of a find. I think she's terrific. I have the greatest time working with her. It's been a really source of the most interesting storyline, I think, for Stan, and in many ways has been the Nina relationship. So we have a great time dancing together. I'm assuming hopefully people watching this know the conclusion of season 2. So what will happen with Nina is a great question mark. What will happen with Annette's character is really one of the questions that we leave hanging at the end of the season. And it seems, certainly for all appearances, that Stan and she's relationship is concluded. But I don't know. A lot of things are possible.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that with her. And we should have said big spoiler alert at the beginning. I usually do that because people need to know if they're going to watch a video like this, we're going to talk about the season. So
yeah.
Well, we never saw her leave the country, so it might be a ploy on their behalf to make you think that they're going through with it.
That's right. All we saw was her drive away in a car. So there's a lot of steps between driving down the street outside the embassy in Washington D.C. to landing in Moscow. A lot of things could happen. Who knows?
Another big plot point for you this year, and by the way, if you look at the wall behind me and all across my house, I'm a big lover of like classic TV, and you get to work with a guy I grew up watching, maybe you did too, Richard Thomas from the Waltons. He's your boss on the show, and you got him in big trouble this year. He almost lost his job.
Yeah. Richard Thomas, I mean, he's an icon, and he's a terrific man and a terrific actor, and it's great to work with him. I really look forward to our scenes together. It was really fun this year to go to his house to see him. I don't think we'd ever seen his character outside the office, so to go into his house was really fun, and hopefully we'll have a chance. And we sort of met his wife for just a second, so who knows what lurks behind those doors. It was definitely provocative in terms of his character's backstory and dimensionality. So I love working with Richard, and he's been in the business forever. So he has a great perspective and he's a great raconteur. He has great stories, and he's just a seasoned veteran who has a lot of wisdom to share.
I think he is still the youngest man to ever win that Best Drama Actor category. He won.
Oh, really?
Either the first season or second season of the Waltons, and he must have been only like 22, 23. I mean, it's rare for a guy that age to be the lead on a drama anyway.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I don't know that show very well. Like, that wasn't part of my childhood, so I've sneaked a couple of peeks since I'm working with Richard, and it's amazing. It is an amazing show. But I'd actually, it's maybe fortunately for me because it's easier not to see Richard as another character. But I don't really. That show's not really in my DNA.
When you live in the South like I do, everybody grew up watching the Waltons and Little House on the Prairie, so.
Right. I grew up in the city. It wasn't this big. I mean, I guess a lot of my friends did. A lot of the girls in my class all watched Little House on the Prairie. I never watched that one either, actually. I was more The Odd Couple.
Oh, I love The Odd Couple. That's another one of my favorites. In fact, I've got a TV guide right over there with the two guys from that show.
Wow.
Speaking of watching, I mean, like we talked earlier, you've got your half of the show, and Matthew and Carrie have their half of the show, and I'm wondering, do you watch the episodes? Do you get really interested in just seeing what's going on in the other half of the Americans' world?
You know, it's a good question. When we're in production and shooting, I try not to get too involved or knowledgeable about what's going on in Philip and Elizabeth's world because my character doesn't know that. So in a weird way, I find it helpful to sort of stay in Stan's reality. Of course, I do read the scripts, and so I do know, but I don't watch too much. It's usually after the show's wrapped, now in the summer, I'll get a chance to catch up and really enjoy the show without the pressure of, just as a viewer.
When we talked to Carrie last week, she said she can't stand watching herself, so and she knows what happened in her part, so she fast forwards through that part just to watch your section.
That's very nice. I totally relate. I totally understand. That's why I sort of just like to save it. It's hard for me to watch and then have to go to work the next day and do it because criticisms come up and regrets and things you wish you'd done differently. So it's easier for me just to sort of stay away from it when we're in production. Yeah.
One thing Matthew and I talked about was whether it's next season, whether it's the 4th, the 5th. There's a point coming down the road. There's a reason the family living across the street. All of you are going to get tangled up in a pretty bad way at some point.
Well, from your lips, let it be in the 5th or 6th season. That'd be great.
It's not an if. It's going to happen. We don't know how. We don't know what will happen. We don't know who's going to survive, but we know it's going to happen.
Right. It does seem like it's set up pretty well. The table is set for some really interesting meals between those families. Hopefully, there's a lot of spokes to follow in that wheel. There's a lot of places you can go with those two families.
The moment when you realize what's going on is going to be incredible. When you realize who this couple really is.
Yeah, that's a mind blower. That would be a mind blower.
I'm thinking it's not going to be like Dean Norris sitting on the toilet in Breaking Bad, though.
No, hopefully it won't involve a toilet.
They've run that course already for that. That storyline's knocked out. What do you know about season 3, and when will you go back to shoot that?
We know nothing about season 3. I mean, I know nothing about season 3. I don't believe anybody maybe knows much about season 3. I think it's yet to be written. Usually the writers' room comes back together over the summer and they start really digging into mapping out the season. You can talk to Joe and Joel about that. I'd be curious you can ask them for me maybe. That would be great.
That's the question from Noah is what will happen on season 3?
Yeah.
Well, that chat's coming up Friday, so I'll make sure we send a link to your rep so you can watch that one. Maybe you'll find out something. Well, tell us what's going on. You said you're in New Mexico. What are you shooting? I'm
just finishing up this film, Jane Got a Gun, which is a Western that I worked on. We're just doing some additional photography, actually. It's a Western with Natalie Portman and Joel Edgerton and Ewan McGregor. It's being directed by Gavin O'Connor. It's a good period, beautiful, fun 19th century Western. And I get to do a lot of work with Natalie, which is the first time I've worked with her since Beautiful Girls, which was my first film, and her, I think, second. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of reminiscing.
What has she been doing since Beautiful Girls? I don't think we've heard back from her.
I know. I think she's been living in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, working on some kind of choreography. But she's still
done pretty well for herself.
She's still just as talented as she was.
When will that be out? What's the timeline?
I think it's coming out. This is coming out in the winter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not way off in the
So
future.
not too far away. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you just got a dream world. On your day job, you get to play FBI and policeman, like you probably grew up as a kid playing that, and then you get to do westerns on your off time.
Yeah, they get to ride a horse and grow a beard, and it's nice to take off the Stan suit and be out on the prairie.
Well, listen, we're an awards website, and Emmy ballots are out right now, and we feel like Americans is going to make a really strong push this summer. So other FX shows have done that. Justified didn't do anything at the Emmys its first year, and then came on really strong in the second. So we feel like it's going to happen for all of you, and good luck with that.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks.
And have a great summer.
Thanks, you too.